Hello guys, welcome back to our anime moments. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of upcoming episode of Tales of Herding Gods based on novel. So let's start. The huge stone formation changed continuously as countless cubes arranged and assembled themselves properly, forming a floating stone formation that frantically rushed into the battlefield. Qin Mu stood on one huge stone that rose up and down. He watched the cubes of all sizes moving about continuously. They sometimes formed a wall and sometimes dispersed like smoke. His attainments in formation skills were extremely high. Bamboo City entered the battle under her control and opened up a path for the divine arts practitioners of He family behind. Rumble. A mountain giant rushed over with a weapon which was extremely strange. It was a thick club that was the shape of a mountain and had brass bells of all sizes. However, even the smallest of them was terrifyingly huge. The mountain giant smashed the club at Bamboo City's formation. Instantly, the brass bells hanging on it rang, and a terrifying sound wave bombarded Bamboo City, shattering many stones into pieces. He immediately changed her formation, and countless huge rocks attached themselves to the club. In an instant, the terrifying weapon was completely covered up and the ringings of the bells were muted. The mountain spent a great deal of effort to raise the club, but before it could swing it, it saw numerous huge rock rolling down the club and onto his arm. He executed the formation, and its power burst forth, breaking the mountain giant's arm. The mountain giant seemed to have not felt anything, for it outstretched its other hand in a grabbing motion as if nothing had happened. Upon entering the huge stone formation, it tried to catch He, but his other arm was soon also covered by huge rocks. Its palm became denser and denser, heavier and heavier. He family's formation skills are indeed extraordinary. Qin Mu praised and suddenly jumped out of Bamboo City's formation. He landed onto the arm of the mountain giant and leaped around as though he was flying, rushing toward its head. On the mountaintop, there was another battlefield, where numerous divine arts practitioners of True Heaven Palace welcomed the divine arts practitioners of Gong family. The two sides were fighting fiercely on the mountaintop, but were stuck in a stalemate. Qin Mu rushed over, and a ball of silver light exploded with a wave of his hand. It was his sword pellet that was 2 feet in radius. It rose into the sky and spun rapidly. Countless swords burst forth from within it. They became sword lights and passed through the fighting crowd. All 17 sword forms were unleashed, and all of them had myriads of transformations. 8,000 swords and 17 kinds of transformations drowned out every woman on the mountaintop. Qin Mu leaped down from the mountain. The 8,000 swords behind him were like wind blowing the clouds, sticking closely to him. They clanked as they returned back into the sword pellet above his head. On the mountaintop, the divine arts practitioners of True Heaven Palace collapsed and died. Only the female divine arts practitioners of Gong family were left. Halfway down the mountain, a grass dragon flew out and caught Qin Mu. Chief Shi Yuting of Shi family stood on its head, and beside her, green vines surged forward like flood dragons. They grew frantically, blooming and bearing fruit. The countless green vines carried the female divine arts practitioners of Shi family up the bodies of the mountain giants while planting their roots between the mountain rocks. The practitioners executed their divine arts to make grasses, trees, and vines grow on the bodies of the mountain giants and dismember them. Suddenly, terrifying pulses came from Vermilion Bird Bead, and a huge vermilion bird flapped its wings. A blazing sea of fire rushed toward Shi Yuting, who was among the mountains. She stood on the head of the grass dragon as she cast her spell. Green light shrouded her and formed into a huge ball of grass to face the sea of fire. The next instant, it was ignited by the blazing fire. By the time the sea of fire passed through, there was little of the grass ball left but for its shape. It then split open, and Shi Yuting brought Qin Mu higher and higher into the sky with help of the green vine on which she was standing. Qin Mu leaped down from it and streaked diagonally through the air. He stretched out his hand to grab at what was above him and pulled out Carefree Sword from the sword pellet. Carefree Sword grew in size, and the thousands of swords entered it one after another. Qin Mu's falling speed grew faster and faster, and his aura grew stronger and stronger too. The next instant, an explosion rang out when his body crashed onto a mountain peak. The incomparably huge mountain giant to which it belonged stumbled from the impact. When Qin Mu landed, the terrifying impact raised a ring of pressure which blew away most of the female disciples of True Heaven Palace. Only a few who were on Seven Stars Realm and Celestial Being Realm could barely keep their footing. But the noise after the explosion didn't disappear, the space hummed and trembled. It was due to Carefree Sword slicing straight down through the giant. Boom! The next moment, cracking sounds came from the head of the mountain giant. A huge crack spread through the middle of it. Even though Qin Mu hadn't managed to split the head apart, the power of his sword was no small matter. When Carefree Sword slashed down again, countless flying swords swirled out from it and sliced forward. In an instant, 8,000 flying swords sliced through the air from one end of the mountaintop to the other. Severed limbs rained down. Before they could even touch the ground, Qin Mu had already rushed forward. Sword lights flashed and sliced among two strong practitioners of True Heaven Palace that were of Celestial Being Realm. The two women had been caught off guard and had already suffered numerous injuries. When he came close, the three of them fluttered around like butterflies. The two women were experts of True Heaven Palace after all. Even though they weren't proficient in close combat and had been injured by Qin Mu, they won in the density of their cultivation, which far surpassed that of Qin Mu. Soon, they regained their balance. The primordial spirits of the two women flew out. When they were about to raise in midair, ready to jump at Qin Mu, grass dragons suddenly came from below and grew under their feet, quickly binding them. While Chief Shi Yuting landed on the head of the mountain giant, Qin Mu leaped up. The hearts of the practitioners' brows had a red mark each. Their corporeal bodies had been stabbed by Carefree Sword, and their brains were destroyed. Shi Yuting was only a step later than Qin Mu to come down, but he had already wiped out all the divine arts practitioners of True Heaven Palace on the mountaintop. Only the two experts of Celestial Being Realm were left. She knew that if the two experts released their primordial spirits that Qin Mu was definitely no match for them and might get killed instead, so she chose to first bind their corporeal bodies. However, she hadn't expected that Qin Mu would end the battle so quickly. She had just managed to land on the mountaintop when Qin Mu had already killed the two experts of Celestial Being Realm. Shi Yuting looked over and saw him sprinting through the sky. Countless flying swords swooshed as they rushed forward, lying down a path under the youth's feet to carry him into the distance. Heavenly Devil Cult Master is truly extraordinary, Shi Yuting exclaimed. Qin Mu was rushing toward another mountain giant when terrifying aura wafted off True Heaven Palace. Its experts flew out and entered the battlefield. The number of experts in True Heaven Palace isn't little. It should be the elders who made the move, right? Their targets should be the heads of each influential family. Just as Qin Mu thought that, he saw Mu Yingxue on a white cloud face the experts of True Heaven Palace. Behind her was Fu Yunxi executing her divine arts to move the clouds from right behind her. Qin Mu put away his sword and executed heaven-pilfering divine legs to sprint over frantically. He caught up with Mu Yingxue in a few breaths' time and landed by her side on the cloud. You poison. I supplement. The two of them looked at each other with smiles. They faced the strong practitioners of True Heaven Palace, the elders on Life and Death Realm who released their primordial spirits. They took the god forms of the four great spirit bodies and rushed toward Qin Mu and Mu Yingxue. They flicked their fingers as one poisoned while the other supplemented. The latter assisted in raising the toxicity, and as they executed their methods, the sea of clouds passed by them, bringing the poison toward the elders of True Heaven Palace. It was Fu Yunxi's attack. The sea of clouds churned and drowned out the elders of True Heaven Palace along with their primordial spirits. They were extraordinary and executed all kinds of moves to break the sea of clouds. But suddenly, the expressions of the women changed drastically as their flesh started melting and their primordial spirits started disintegrating. Before long, they turned into piles of dried-up bones that fell to the ground. With the third and fourth ranking experts of the poison path working together, even gods wouldn't be able to handle them, much less some elders. Qin Mu and Mu Yingxue separated and rushed toward the other mountain giants. Rumble. A mountain giant collapsed, and its huge body dropped to the ground, causing terrifying tremors. Cheers erupted from the divine arts practitioners of He family, and they were followed by another loud rumble. One more mountain giant fell. The influential families worked together, and their eyes had turned red from the slaughter. After overthrowing the mountain giants, Fang family dismembered them to change them into hundreds of smaller hill giants to continue fighting in the battle. When combined with the formation of He family, the meteorological attacks of Fu family, the grass and trees of Shi family, the long and wide rivers of Gong family, the poisons of Mu family, and the sword skills of Luo family, the strength of the rebellion was continuously growing. Gradually, the battle quietened down, for there were only a couple thousand hill giants left. Countless divine arts practitioners from all the families were gasping for air as they stood among blocks of rock. The mountain giants of True Heaven Palace had finally been wiped out by them. Tens of thousands of female divine arts practitioners raised their heads and looked at True Heaven Palace that was high above them. They had finally achieved the first step of their plan. They had faced off against the sacred ground and were about to walk into the place which represented the divine right of West Earth. Even though they had sacrificed countless sisters, the overthrow of True Heaven Palace was an immense achievement for which any sacrifice was worth it. True Heaven Palace was silent. Suddenly, the sound of gold and metal clanking rang out. God's aura slowly spread out, growing stronger and stronger. With True Heaven Palace as the center, the God's aura flooded out in all directions, suppressing the divine arts practitioners of all the influential families. They found it hard even to breathe. The clanking of metal became louder and louder. Finally, the golden sculpture walked out of the palace gate with its eyes closed. Its body was tall, sturdy, and over 30 yards tall. The runes on its body blinked with light. The god statue opened its eyes, and divine light shone in the sky before sweeping toward the ground. The statues were like true living gods. Moments later, another god statue walked out, followed by the third, fourth, fifth. 7 god statues walked out of True Heaven Palace and stood in front of the gate. The divine light from their eyes lit up the whole place. They were god statues that had been awakened by the technique to awaken spirits. They had experienced who knew how many years of baptism to become abnormally strong, like gods. Rattling sounds came from True Heaven Palace, and tens of thousands of divine arts practitioners from Yu family walked out one after another. True Heaven Palace Master appeared under the palace gate and looked down at the warriors that were ready to attack her place, and scorn appeared on her face. Everyone's blood ran cold. Over 10,000 people had died or suffered injuries just to wipe out the mountain giants that served as guards. Yet they were merely the outer strength of True Heaven Palace. The core had been preserved and was even more terrifying. The 7 god statues were probably enough to wipe out all of the influential families. With tens of thousands of strong practitioners of Yu family in addition, what awaited the rebels was a complete and utter defeat. Qin Mu looked around and saw despair written on the faces of even He, Fang Kadi, and Luo Yinyu. He went to Fu Yunshi's side and asked her, "Sister Yunshi, you can control meteorological phenomenon, so can you control lightning?" Fu Yunshi nodded and said with some sadness, "My Fu family is skilled in controlling the meteorological phenomenon, and lightning is also part of it. However, after this battle, the technique of meteorological phenomenon in West Earth is probably going to be lost." Qin Mu smiled. "How much lightning can you guys control?" Fu Yunshi was slightly stunned by his words and took a look at him. Qin Mu took out the true dragon's nest and said solemnly, "Fatty dragon, come over." The dragon Qilin immediately ran over, and Qin Mu landed on his back. He took out 5 thunderpot and placed it on the dragon Qilin's head. He felt a chill down his bones and immediately laughed. "Cult Master, Human Emperor, Old Master Qin. Why are you doing this? This little beast's constitution is weak and bones frail. How can I withstand being blown to death by 10,000 lightning bolts? With the experts of Fu family, you won't be hurt at all. Get up and fly forward," Qin Mu said in consolation. While shivering uncontrollably, the dragon Qilin stepped on the fire clouds to fly up. Qin Mu said solemnly, "Sister Yunshi, have all of the disciples of Fu family follow me." True Heaven Palace Master smiled when she saw the dragon Qilin carrying Qin Mu over. He grinned back at her, then suddenly threw his sword pellet up. It split open, and 8,000 swords stabbed 5 thunder cauldron in unison. The moment 8,000 flying swords stabbed 5 Thunderpot, the world became incomparably silent, without any sound to be heard. Even the flying swords made no sound. Then, the space above 5 Thunderpot exploded as a trace of lightning shot out. The black lightning stretched upward and exploded, pouring toward the sky. Standing in front of the palace gate, True Heaven Palace Master saw the black lightning, which looked like a flood dragon baring its fangs and brandishing its claws. It then split up, and the incomparably bright lightning seemed like a bunch of flood dragons scuttling upward. In an instant, there were more than 10,000 bolts that were rushing up into the sky. Yet the next instant, they once again split up into 100 million flood dragons. An incomparably bright cloud formed in front of True Heaven Palace, and 5 Thunderpot floated into the sky, releasing lightning bolts that continuously scuttled upward into the thundercloud. Meanwhile, behind the thundercloud, Fu Yunxi had tens of thousands of women of Fu family to execute their divine arts, prodding the thundercloud to rush at True Heaven Palace. The palace master's expression changed drastically, and she grabbed for the black tortoise bead that one of the elders of Yu family was using. Before her fingers could wrap around it, however, the terrifying thundercloud had already reached True Heaven Palace. Wherever it passed, the visions formed by white tiger bead, vermilion bird bead, and black tortoise bead were all disintegrated. The sea vaporized, the fire was extinguished, and the golden mountain crumbled. Boom! The first lightning struck and went straight for True Heaven Palace. An explosion rang out when it hit a god statue. The first bolt of lightning was like a spark falling into a boiling pot of oil, instantly igniting everything inside. It was also like the first raindrop from a heavy rain cloud, and what followed was billions and billions of lightning bolts streaking across the sky and drowning out True Heaven Palace. Black Tortoise Divine Shield. True Heaven Palace Master shouted out while struggling for her life to activate Black Tortoise Bead. A huge black tortoise's shield then expanded outward, covering the front of True Heaven Palace. Boom! Countless bolts of lightning exploded upon striking the black tortoise's shield, and the surface of the divine shield continuously shrunk from being compressed. True Heaven Palace Matter coughed out blood as she struggled to defend her people. Black Tortoise Divine Shield soon was no longer able to protect all of the disciples of True Heaven Palace. The sea of thunderstorms swept in, and countless women vanished in a puff of smoke. Even the 8 god statues whose auras were close to those of gods also couldn't endure the thunderstorm. When they rushed to fight it, their limbs actually melted, turning them into molten gold and copper. When Xiong Chia looked at True Heaven Palace from afar, she saw it had been transformed into a sea of lightning. Countless bolts burst, making the place incomparably bright. Earlier, the girl's green dragon bead had to fight with the other 3 great spirit treasures, but once the thundercloud destroyed their power, the pressure on her was greatly reduced. She could finally take a breather. Chia, the green dragon's attribute is lightning. Xiong Xiu suddenly appeared behind her and said gently, "Let's use this green dragon bead to send our enemies on their way." Mother. Xiong Chia was both surprised and delighted. Xiong Xiu revealed a smile and covered her daughter's small hands with her own. They held the green dragon bead together and said in a low voice, "Xiong family's deaths need to be avenged with their enemies' deaths." Boundless green light poured out from green dragon bead and transformed into a green dragon that rushed into the thundercloud. The power of the lightning instantly rose dramatically. True Heaven Palace Master saw this, and her heart fell into despair. Yu family is finished. Black Tortoise Divine Shield exploded into pieces, and the boundless thunderstorm drowned out her and the disciples of Yu family behind her. At that moment, a sword light pierced through the boundless thunderstorm. Biego broke through it and went straight for Xiong Xiu. His sword light seemed to be perfected, sweeping away everything before it. Even the thunderstorm was sliced apart. His sword skills and sword path had reached perfection, and even the thunderstorm couldn't hurt him. The sword light was incomparably quick and looked as though it had come from outer space. Lightning turned into fine powder, and even the brightest flash of it couldn't mask the light bursting from the sword. Before it reached Xiong Xiu and her daughter's face, however, a sword light suddenly appeared and blocked that sword with a clink. "Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor?" Biego smiled. "I've long known you were in West Earth, but you have a vulgar natural disposition, always hiding in the dark. However, you could never find a chance to attack me, right? In the end, it was still I who forced you out. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor walked over, stepping on the air like it was flat ground. He had no expression and wore green clothing. A sword was in his right hand while his left was behind his back, clutching sword secrets. Diego wore white, but he also had a hand behind his back clutching sword secrets. The two figures moved up and down through the thunderstorm. Even though the sound of thunder was world-shaking, it still couldn't cover the clash of the swords. The clinks were like beads falling on a jade plate, ringing out continuously. Under the 5 thunder pot, Qin Mu was being pulled in by the intense lightning energy. Its force of attraction sucked him and the dragon Qilin toward the bolts of lightning. Even the fat dragon Qilin seemed to only weigh as much as paper, being drawn by the electric current. He flailed helplessly, but there was nothing on which he could grab. Qin Mu also felt that he had become incomparably light, and his hair flew in all directions. Among his strands, lightning crisscrossed and shuttled randomly while crackling. He even felt all the hair on his body filling with fine bolts of lightning as the terrifying power hit his body. It felt as if he had been stabbed all over by white immortal's needles. There was no place that wasn't in pain. Qin Mu exhausted all of his energy to execute 9 Heaven's Eyes awakening skill, and the rays of lightning also filled his eyes. He could barely see the dragon Qilin, even if the beast's mana had risen up and even the scales were standing upright. Lightning rolled across them, bouncing back and forth. Qin Mu took out the true dragon's nest. Its weight pressed him down, and he couldn't help grunting. However, he finally suppressed the pull of the lightning, and his body finally fell from the sky. On his way, he crashed into the dragon Qilin and brought him down as well. With both hands hugging the dragon's nest, he used its weight to escape from the lightning's pull. When he was a good distance away, he raised his head to look up at the sky. 5 thunderpot floated there, raising higher and higher. His 8,000 swords seemed to be frozen in time and floated around the 5 thunderpot. Lightning passed through them as if they were lightning rods, attracting it on purpose. The flying swords turned red-hot from the terrifying energy, and Qin Mu worried if they could even withstand the impact of the divine lightning from 5 thunderpot. He broke free of the lightning pull when green light shone in the sky. He raised his head and saw the green dragon bead detonating the thundercloud. "You family is finished," he murmured. The thunder was so loud that even he himself couldn't hear his words. He then saw Diego flying over an Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor intercepting him. A green and a white figure fought each other in the thundercloud. Old schemer! Qin Mu spat out and observed the battle of the 2 great experts. He saw that they did not use sword skill divine arts, but instead held the swords in their right hands while clutching sword secrets in their left behind their backs. Their movements were extremely fast and hard to discern. The sword secrets behind their backs were changing continuously as though they were calculating something. Qin Mu was quite surprised. The changes in both of their sword secrets were simply too fast for him to see them clearly. He could only struggle to memorize the changes of the hand signs as he faintly felt that their sword secrets were extremely important. As for the fight between Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, it had already reached a degree of simplicity. There were completely no changes in their sword skills, and there were only a few basic sword forms. However, every attack would cause the space around the swords to vibrate. Their divine arts could be faintly seen to be hiding behind that vibration. The sword path hidden within was not something that Qin Mu could comprehend. As expected of the big sicko that appears once every 500 years. His attainments in sword path have actually risen so fast. Qin Mu tried his best to remember a few sword secrets when the god statues braced against countless bolts of divine lightning and rushed into the thunderstorm. They exploded with terrifying god aura and worked together to disperse the thundercloud in one strike. Countless bolts of lightning instantly poured down and struck everywhere. The 8 god statues grew tattered, with not one of them remaining in a good condition, but they were still overflowing with battle power and tried to reach Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. The man seemed to be completely unaware of it and continued to fight with Diego while Xiongxiu brought Xiongqia closer. They raised the green dragon bead from which green light was bursting forth. It lignified the bodies of the 8 god statues and froze them in the air. Suddenly, a lignified statue twisted its neck around, and a strange smile appeared on the god statue's face. It stretched its hand out, and the green dragon bead in Xiongqia's hands flew out against her wool, rushing over toward the hand of the god statue. "Little girl, thank you." Xiongqia was stunned and lost all control of the green dragon bead while Xiongqiu felt a chill run down her spine. "Be careful. That's the god of true heaven power." Before she could finish her sentence, multicolored lights emanated from Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's head. A flying bridge broke through the air, and it seemed to be able to reach inconceivable places. The boundless divine light seemed to be coming from the end of time and space as it filled the 9 heavens. At the end of the bridge was a cluster of celestial palaces that could be seen faintly, but which weren't clear. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's primordial spirit rushed out from that hazy celestial palace and stepped onto the divine bridge. His sword flew over, seemingly disregarding space. The sword light passed through time, and the instant that God statue took hold of the green dragon bead, the primordial spirit penetrated its brow. The blade pierced to the back of its head. Blood dripped down the god statue's forehead, and there were blood and brain matter flowing out from the back of the head as well. The damage didn't seem like it had been done to a god statue, but a living form. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's expressionless face finally broke into a smile as his primordial spirit soared back into the air. With a hand behind his back and a hand holding a sword, he circled around Biego. "You were never my target." Kai. He attacked with his primordial spirit from 2 sides, and the sword lights flashed as they severed Biego's limbs. He then raised his sword to cut off Biego's head. "Divine Bridge!" Qin Mu cried out in alarm, and his nervousness finally settled down. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was no doubt the saint that appears once every 500 years. Only half a year had passed since Qin Mu and the rest had established the space algebra model of the Divine Bridge, and he had actually managed to cultivate the Divine Bridge. "Old schemer, you finished patching your divine bridge and entered the celestial palace, so you are already a god, yet you still hide in the corner and scheme against people." Qin Mu cursed him silently while shouts of countless women rang out behind him. Under the leadership of the heads of all clans, the divine arts practitioners of all the influential families attacked True Heaven Palace. Mu Yingxue passed by Qin Mu's side and said in a low voice, "Little man, while Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor is still alive, never rebel. You can't outsmart him." He also passed by his side and whispered, "If you rebel, you will die a swift death. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor is too cunning." Qin Mu didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he thought to himself, "I've never even considered rebelling. However, Imperial Preceptor, this guy is really cunning." Qin Mu soared into the sky and saw that the vibrations of 5 Thunderpop were slowly stopping. Fu Yunxi with numerous women of Fu family were guiding the lightning in their surroundings away. "Cult Master Qin, your swords!" Fu Yunxi shouted out. Qin Mu summoned his flying swords, and the 8,000 of them gathered together into a sword pellet that was the size of a tangerine. How did the sword pellet shrink so much? Qin Mu was slightly stunned. He was about to grab his sword pellet when a few girls from Fu family flew over with nervous expressions. "Cult Master Qin, don't move." Qin Mu stayed motionless while the girls muttered something under their breaths. Bolts of lightning flew out from his body, pulled out by the girls. "There was still some lightning in your body. Because you haven't come into contact with anyone, it hasn't burst forth," one of the girls said. "If you had touched something, the power would have burst forth. The lightning in the big bottle gourd is divine lightning that has terrifying power. Now that we have taken away the lightning, you can move as you wish." Qin Mu gave his thanks when he heard a rumbling. He looked toward the source of the sound and saw that the dragon Qilin was trying to step on fire clouds to slow his landing. However, before he could do that, the power of lightning in his body suddenly burst forth. The lightning escaped from the dragon Qilin's body, crackled and struck everything around him. The huge fatty was like a lightning ball, bouncing up and down. In an instant, the dragon Qilin was charred. The girls of Fu family hurriedly rushed over while Qin Mu pretended not to see anything. He instead stretched his hand to grab the sword pellet. Its weight the same, but it was much smaller. It could fit in his palm and was much easier to control than before. He couldn't hold back his delight. By borrowing 5 Thunder Pots power to refine my sword pellet to such a step, I'm not far from cultivating sword into water. Cult Master, didn't you say that I wouldn't get harmed? Smoke billowed out from the Dragon Chilean's mouth when he spoke. Qin Mu pretended not to hear anything and put back 5 Thunder Pot back into the True Dragon's nest before rushing to True Heaven Palace. Cult Master! The Dragon Chilean wanted to rush after him, but more women of Fu family surrounded him. Stop moving around, you fatty. Your body is so big and you even held that huge bottle gourd, so you have the most lightning in your body. Be careful of being electrocuted to death if you run around more. The Dragon Chilean immediately went still and smiled. Sisters, I'm not disfigured, am I? My dragon scales are the most beautiful and majestic, so they can't be destroyed. The girls looked at him, troubled. The Dragon Chilean was suspicious and wanted to twist his head around to look at his body. However, because he was too fat and his neck was too thick, he couldn't achieve that. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was the first to land in front of True Heaven Palace's gate. There were charred bodies and huge pits made by the lightning strikes everywhere around it. They were still emitting black smoke, and there were some places that were still in flames. True Heaven Palace Master was collapsed on the floor, from where she looked at the middle-aged man that was walking toward her. She pleaded in a soft voice, I'm pregnant. Consider the baby in my stomach, please don't kill me. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor walked to her side and said indifferently, whether you are pregnant or not has nothing to do with me. I have no grudge with you, so I won't purposely harm you. I just want this True Heaven Palace, this West Earth. True Heaven Palace Master was slightly stunned. Xiong Xiu brought Xiong Chia to the front of the palace, and the corners of True Heaven Palace Master's eyes twitched. Nikue, I'm pregnant. Many of the women in my Xiong family were also pregnant when you executed them. Intense hatred could be seen in Xiong Xiu's eyes when she snatched the black tortoise bead from the prone woman's hands before taking Xiong Chia's green dragon bead too. She lowered her voice then and said, have you ever pitied them? The green dragon bead shined on True Heaven Palace Master. She wanted to escape, but her body and primordial spirit swiftly lignified. In the blink of an eye, she turned into a wooden sculpture that seemed in the middle of a struggle. Xiong Xiu let out a shaky breath and brought Xiong Chia out of True Heaven Palace while saying coldly, I won't kill you, but I won't let you off just because you're pregnant. Become a wooden sculpture in front of the palace gate and kneel here forever. The women of the influential families rushed into True Heaven Palace to kill the remaining members of Yu family. Qin Mu also came over and saw that the palace was extremely wide and had many alleys. There were many members of Yu family hidden all throughout it. Some of the strong practitioners of Yu family used Vermilion Bird Bead and White Tiger Bead to continue fighting back. The power of those two beads was strangely powerful, because even though the cultivation of the people controlling those two spirit treasures wasn't very high, they could still unleash astonishing power. Qin Mu slaughtered his way into the palace with everyone while thinking, Pan Gongso should still be in the palace, right? No matter what, I can't let him off this time. Suddenly, golden light shone when a woman raised a golden, translucent bead. Inside it was the soul of a white tiger. When golden light burst forth from the bead, people who got caught by it instantly broke into pieces. Qin Mu executed his sword pellet in a hurry, and 8,000 swords surrounded him. The noise of battle could be heard in the distance, but he got blown backward by the golden light, along with his swords. Qin Mu tumbled several times before coming to a stop. He then saw that he had flown dozens of yards. White tiger bead. He dodged into a huge hall when the golden light came pouring in like a flood through the one he'd been in moments ago. Qin Mu focused his gaze to look at it and saw that wherever the golden light passed, gold chi seemed to scatter. The women who had died under the golden light had been injured by the incomparably sharp gold chi. Qin Mu hugged a huge pillar and exerted force from his waist, planning to lift it up and use it to squash the expert of Yu family which was controlling the white tiger bead. The pillar didn't budge at all. Qin Mu gave a grunt and exerted more force, however, the pillar still didn't budge. This video will end here.